first afternoon seminar, 2:15 every day this week, all the way Tuesday through Friday. And our title of this seminar is The Inner Sanctuary. And today's subtitle is Boundaries. Okay, and our speaker is Amanda Anguish. Let me just tell you a little bit about Amanda before we get started here and invite her to come up. At 9 years old, she had already built her first house.
I'm going to be very soft here for a minute. So let me just say that again. Our 2:15 seminar is called The Inner Sanctuary. We'll be meeting here at 2:15 every day this week, and the speaker is Amanda Anguish. At 9 years old, Amanda built her first house, constructed from her brother's diaper boxes, and included miniature furniture that she handmade. Ever since 9 years old, she can't help but see the potential in something or in someone. Graduate of Loma Linda University, she's a licensed marriage and family therapist, started her therapy career working in addiction, and later worked with at-risk youth. Today she's working full-time at Beautiful Minds Medical in Auburn, California. Has anybody ever been to Auburn, California here? Some have. Very good. Okay. And she facilitates the intensive outpatient program for depression and anxiety, and co-host of the Brain People podcast. So if you haven't seen that, the Brain People podcast, you'll want to look at that, listen to that. She's also an editor of EQ Curriculum for elementary students. And Amanda, along with her husband Tim, who's also here in the back, want to raise your hand, Tim? There he is back there. They came together this week. We're thankful for that. And they together desire to help prepare people to resist Satan's lies and uncover the great truths of God's Word that are meant to protect us in the last battlefield. Does anybody know what the last battlefield is? The mind. The battlefield of the mind. Her greatest joy is helping people prepare for eternity by practicing Ephesians 4 verse 8. You can look that up if you don't have that memorized. And with an overall theme of the inner sanctuary, Amanda's thoughtful presentations this week will remind us of the importance of our mental health, which can impact our spiritual, physical, and social well-being. So I want you to make sure you stay by all week for her final presentation on Friday at 2:15 right here. So let me just pray, and then we'll welcome Amanda to come up. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the good time we had at lunch and fellowshipping. Again, we thank you for the beautiful day. And we thank you for Beautiful Minds Medical, for Amanda and Tim Anguish, them being here with us today. We just pray that you'll bless Amanda's presentation and be with her mind and thoughts as she's sharing, and all of us as we listen. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, let's welcome Amanda Anguish.
I always feel a bit odd when people clap for me before I've done anything to deserve it. Well, we can't hear you back. I think they have to turn it on.
Is it ready? Okay, there we go. I said I always feel a little bad when people clap before I've done anything to deserve it. So you can wait till later if you want to do that then. I have to say, just standing up here, you guys are all perfectly separated like COVID is happening or something. It's quite interesting. If anybody wants to come up and look, you're welcome to come up here. So today, this afternoon, we're going to be talking about the inner sanctuary. Does anybody know what the inner sanctuary is? The most holy place, but we're talking about ourselves. We're first a sanctuary, aren't we? We're a temple of the Holy Spirit, and the inner sanctuary is the mind. So I want you to be thinking about that this week as we talk about different aspects of our inner sanctuary. And today we're going to talk about boundaries. How many of you... Oh, I didn't get a clicker. Was I supposed to get a clicker? That probably helps, doesn't it? Otherwise, we're going to be stuck on this slide the whole time. Get to see two of me. Do you have a... What else can I tell you before we get to that? Well, this year marks the 20th year of me doing therapy. So that's a big deal.
Forward and backward.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is my 20th year of doing therapy. Anybody want to guess what I did for a living before I became a therapist?
You worked at Wendy's.
No. No, I did not work at Wendy's, but great guess. Right before I worked as a therapist, I used to do fundraising for a living. Go figure, how do you transfer from fundraising to doing therapy? Well, I was working in an Adventist academy in California, and I got the wonderful opportunity of having 4 girls from the academy work in my office with me. And I realized working with them that I was in the wrong profession. I really wanted to be helping people. And I've always loved psychology, but as you know, there are some types of psychology we have to watch out for. And so I think the Bible and Spirit of Prophecy are perhaps the 2 best sources. They are the 2 best sources for our mental health and well-being. And if you haven't read the Bible from a therapeutic perspective, I challenge you to do that this year. It's wonderful. We're going to be talking about boundaries, though, today. And where do I point this? Oh, there we go. When you think of a boundary, what do you often think of? There's some different words here that we have. Some people think of borders. That happens in our politics right now. A lot of that's coming up. We think of the word limit, sometimes the confines of something, demarcations. These are all definitions of boundary, but one of my favorite definitions of a boundary is an expectation. Do you like to know what to expect? When you go to your job, what do we often get when we take on a new job that indicates a boundary? Job description. If you didn't get a job description, how would you know where your job ends and somebody else's job begins? Isn't that a good boundary to have? Some people like to do somebody else's job and not do their own, and vice versa. So expectations are great. How about expectations in terms of marriage? There is a boundary that happens even on your wedding day. Does anybody know what that's called? Your vows, yeah. Do you realize how many boundaries are in your vows? I promise to love, honor, and cherish till... That's a boundary, right? All of those things within traditional vows, not everybody does traditional vows, but those are all boundaries. How about when you leave this campus here and you start driving down the road? Do you notice any boundaries? Speed limits are boundaries. What did you say? Middle line. The middle line, yeah. How many of you like it when somebody's driving on the other side of that middle line at you? And sometimes we have limits even on that. Sometimes it's a broken yellow line, and sometimes it's a solid that indicates don't go over this, or only in certain areas. But boundaries are a lot more prevalent than we often realize. And I would dare to say that everybody likes boundaries. If anybody in here doesn't like boundaries, I'll actually prove where you do like them. Just spend a little time with you and I'll find where you do like boundaries. Do you like your stuff being taken without being asked? You like boundaries. Anybody have a fence around their property? It doesn't happen so much here in the Midwest, but in California and certain suburbs, there are lots and lots and lots of fences and boundaries. We do like boundaries, but I like this word expectation, and I think it's really important, and you can see this even throughout the sanctuary message in the Old Testament. Weren't there boundaries? Yep. Absolutely. I've been reading a book by Leslie Harding, and there's a lot of parts in that book that show us how God put boundaries within the sanctuary. And I'm going to show you some of these. Well, God's put boundaries throughout the whole Bible, but in the beginning, it says the heaven and the earth. And what separated the heaven and the earth? Or the sky and the land? Or the animals and the people? There were certain boundaries. We also have evening and morning. There's a separation or a boundary that happens there. The 10 Commandments. Isn't that an example of boundaries too? And I think I heard somebody say that you even learned how those 10 Commandments were instilled in the early society even before the official 10 Commandments came. But also there's the outer court, the holy place, the veil, and the most holy place. So there's boundaries there as well. And then even around the camp, the 12 tribes, they were all separated by their tribes. It tells us that God loves organization and that we need boundaries too. God doesn't do anything that we don't need. They're for our good. And then even how the procession of the sanctuary should be carried out. Those all show God has boundaries. He wants things a certain way. And I love how God told the Israelites too, during his sharing of these expectations, that I'm the one who brought you out of Egypt. What is that a signal of? What is that a sign of? One, that he's at the center of all of it, but two, that he actually cares about us. Why did he bring all of the Israelites out of Egypt? Wasn't it to take care of them? Ironically, they questioned that throughout their trip to Canaan. Oh, God brought us out here just to kill us, or Moses, you brought us out here just to let us die. But God keeps reminding them, I'm the one that brought you out of Egypt. I actually care about you, and that's why I'm doing these things. But boundaries are necessary in healthy relationships. We absolutely need boundaries. And even when you heard a little bit of my background, I worked with at-risk teens. So these are kids who have committed all kinds of crimes, done drugs, you name it, all the things that they've done. Even they liked boundaries. I never once found one of those kids that didn't like boundaries. And one of the reasons I knew they liked boundaries is because all of them were mandated to see me. Do you know what that means? They did not voluntarily choose to see me. There was nothing in them that made them want to go to a therapist. By the way, if you ever want to develop thick skin, be a therapist with people who don't want to see you. That's a great way to develop thick skin. But all of these kids, I would spend time with them at least 1 hour each week in a therapy session. And every single time I would see most of the kids, not all of them, most of them would be like, oh, do I have to go with you? I don't want to see you today. Like, I want to do something else instead. And they would eventually come because they were obligated through their probation officer to see me in order to be in good standing with probation. Am I doing so? Okay. And so I noticed, though, something would happen every time I would go on vacation. So I got a certain number of vacation days, and I would often tell the kids in advance, hey, I'm going to go on vacation, and so you're not going to have to come to therapy this week while I'm gone. Now, they would all act excited about that. But ironically, when I would come back, I would hear this, where were you on Tuesday at 3 o'clock? And I was like, what? This kid never wants to see me on Tuesdays at 3 o'clock. What's going on? And over time, I realized, oh, I had upset their expectations of me. They were used to seeing me and going after them every Tuesday at 3 o'clock, depending on what kid it was. It wasn't always Tuesdays and it wasn't always 3 o'clock. But when I would go after that kid would, not want to, but then when I would leave, he would say that. And I would find out, I realized this is how I started responding when they would say that to me. I'd say, oh, you missed me, didn't you? And they'd be like, oh. That was their response. But boundaries are important in relationships, and they're absolutely necessary in relationships. We don't always realize this, but they absolutely are. But you know what? There is a man by the name of Howard Gardner. He's a psychologist. I believe he's still alive. And he came up with 8 different types of intelligences. How many of you are tempted to believe you're not the smartest person, you know. Okay, so this is really important for you because this man, this psychologist, he knows what he's talking about. He came up with 8 different types of intelligences. And you can see through that graphic over there that there's different types of intelligences besides, what's the one we often think of? We often think of IQ, and we often think of like mathematical or scientific or that academic intelligence, right? But what do you notice if you look at this? The top, we have naturalist. What's naturalist intelligence? Anybody here a farmer or have a garden? Have you ever met somebody where you're like, wow, how do they know how to do that? My grandfather was a gardener when he was on this earth. Well, he's still on this earth, just 6 feet under. Wonderful man. But he used to grow the most beautiful gardens. And he could take any little cutting from any plant and find out a way to root it and get it to grow and overwhelm his garden with all these beautiful plants. And I don't think he bought hardly any plants to do this. And it was just beautiful. And then he rigged up a sprinkler system on top of a pergola to act like rain over the whole garden. It was amazing. And my grandma would always yell, Pat, Pat, where are you? Where are you? And we always said, why would she ask that? We all know where he is. He's only ever in one spot. He's in his garden. But he had naturalist intelligence. Now, I'm not saying he didn't have other kinds of intelligences. You can have lots of different intelligences. Anybody in here musical? Some people play one instrument. Some people can pretty much pick up any instrument and play all of them. How about bodily kinesthetic? Did you know you can have physical intelligence? Have you ever seen people who can play just about any sport and they're so athletic and their body just seems to know where to go to catch a ball or to kick something or that sort of thing? Do you know that's a form of intelligence? Absolutely. And then we also have linguistic. Now, some people speak more than one language. Anybody here speak more than one language? How many? Does anybody want to throw out 4 languages? Are you from Europe? Okay. Yeah, their countries are like states here, and they all speak every language of every country around them. I've been there, and I was tempted to learn until I got back to the United States, and then I was like, I have no reason to learn another language here. But some people are just really good at picking up languages, or even words. Some people have a great vocabulary. But I want to point you to the bottom 2 there. Do you see the bottom 2? One is intrapersonal, one is interpersonal intelligence. And I want to show you a little bit more about these. These 2 have to do with emotional intelligence. How many of you have heard of emotional intelligence? That was part of my bio that you heard. I have edited emotional intelligence curriculum for children through Dr. Nedley, Neil Nedley, if you've heard of him. You probably heard of him more than me. But there's 5 aspects to emotional intelligence. One is recognizing our emotions. Some of us did not grow up talking about our emotions, and we're very good at pushing those emotions under the rug, and then somehow they build up at some point in our life, and then we don't know what to do with them. But that's the second one, is managing our emotions. Each one of us, when we have certain emotions, we should be managing those emotions. And as we manage those emotions, we're not being managed by those emotions. A lot of people that I work with are being managed by their emotions. That's when life feels like it's out of control and you don't know what to do with it. That's when we have a problem managing our emotions. Our anger gets out of hand. We yell, we scream, we cry. We don't know what to do with ourselves. That's when we don't know how to manage our emotions. But then we also have recognizing other people's emotions. Do you recognize the changes in your children maybe? Or even the personalities from one child to another? Do you recognize when your spouse or a loved one is acting unlike themselves? Do you notice that? I hope so. That can really help you. Because then that goes to number 4. It's not managing their emotions, just like we do with ourselves, but it's managing our relationships with those people. And all of these are helpful when it comes to making and sticking with our goals. Because why do we not stick with our goals when we make goals? Why do you think it is that we put all this pressure on ourselves to make New Year's resolutions that we only hold on to maybe until March? Maybe it's because we're not able to manage our emotions and manage our relationships with other people. You know, if this person is doing something and I told myself I wasn't going to do that, well, maybe I'm not managing my relationship with that person very well enough to be able to manage what I'm doing in relation to them. Or maybe I'm not able to manage my emotions. When I say I want, or when I feel like I want to do something, or when I feel a certain feeling, I just act on it. But each one of these things, if you can notice, the first 2 have to do with intrapersonal, or you could just abbreviate that to personal things, that personal intelligence. The next 2, there we go. Oops, wow, that was slow. The next 2 have to do with interpersonal, our relationships with other people. But here's the kicker. You already probably saw this. I don't want to hit it too fast. Yeah, see, because both of these have to do with boundaries too. If I'm managing my emotions because I'm recognizing them, doesn't that have to take boundaries, personal boundaries? And when I'm managing my relationships because I'm paying attention to them, doesn't that have to do with interpersonal boundaries? Is there any water, by the way? I went to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning last night. Thank you so much. So my body's probably a little off right now. Each one of these has to do with boundaries. We have to have boundaries in order for us to have emotional intelligence. So we looked at personal boundaries, and personal boundaries have to do with self-control. We have to have self-control in our own physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, even time aspects, verbal, and even financial parts of our lives in order to have personal boundaries. I love this verse in Proverbs 25:28. It says, "He that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls." What is this saying about personal boundaries? Don't we have to have them? Otherwise, what happens? Our lives tend to fall apart. And I see that a lot in my practice. Can I teach you all a song? Now, very few people know this song because I wrote it. I didn't write the tune, or I didn't make up the tune. But you'll recognize the tune. It's to "If You're Happy and You Know It." And it goes like this. When you want what you want, but let it go. When you rush to speak, but take it slow. When your feelings say yes, but you tell them no. Self-control. That's self-control. Do you want to sing it with me? I think it's simple enough. I like to write simple songs because they stick in your head better. Sometimes they never leave. When you want what you want, but let it go. When you rush to speak, but take it slow. When your feelings say yes, but you tell them no. Self-control. That's self-control. If you want to take a picture of this and really annoy your family and try to teach it to them, please do. It's great for little kids, too. I taught this song to my niece, and then I said, "Hey, let's go sing it to your mom." She was really excited about the song until I told her that, and she's like, "No." Does anybody know why? She didn't want to... She didn't want her mom to know she knew about self-control. She wanted to get... She's smart. But we also have to have interpersonal boundaries, and this is the one I want to talk to you about. But first I'm going to give you a little quiz, and these are some questions I want you to ask yourself. And pay attention to how many times you answer yes to these. 1, I agree with others to avoid conflict. 2, you don't have to say it out loud, especially the yeses. You don't have to answer out loud. I find myself unable to say no to things. I'm afraid to say no out of fear or guilt. I allow others to speak for me. I find myself accepting poor treatment from others. I find myself taking on more and more despite potential for burnout. I often try to fix others and their problems. I attempt to control others. I don't trust myself or others. And I often neglect to seek God's will before trying to meet the needs and wants of others. Did you pay attention to how many yeses? If you had any yeses, you may have a problem with boundaries, interpersonal boundaries. Now, here's the thing. I grew up Adventist, so I'm not just Adventist, I'm also a Christian. And one thing I've noticed in the religious world is a lot of people think boundaries are actually bad. Because we grow up hearing things like care and share, and we grow up hearing things like don't be selfish, and that sort of thing. So in our mind, sometimes we create these unhealthy views of saying no versus yes. And we think, oh, in order to be nice, I just have to give and give and give. Or in order to be nice, I have to say yes all the time. Or in order to be a good Christian, I have to do and do and do all the time. But we don't realize there's some side effects of that. And I always like to say healthy boundaries are healthy not just for me, the person setting the boundary, but they're also healthy for the other person. And I'm going to show you some of the ways that this happens. But ultimately, when it comes to, and you're going to see this throughout all of my presentations, so I hope you'll continue to come the rest of this week, every single one of our boundaries starts somewhere. It starts up here. A lot of people spend a lot of time talking about how to make a boundary, but we talk a lot less about how to think about boundaries. And a lot of people don't yet have a healthy perspective of boundaries. We still think it's somehow bad to say no. Well, that's a belief that's going to change the way you implement boundaries or even have boundaries at all. And it changes our behavior in order to have boundaries and our feelings about those boundaries too. And maybe even our feelings about other people having boundaries. So we're going to go through some of these, and there's 10 different ones. Don't worry, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each one of them, but we're going to go through each one of these because I want you to have a healthy perspective of the way that you think, or a healthy thinking about boundaries. So the first one I call codependency, or codependent. And this is where people often don't have healthy boundaries because they believe I'm nobody without a somebody. We get our identity from other people, the people that we're around, and so we lose sight of who we are and maybe our God-given identity. And so one of the things that we do is we just take on whatever everybody else around us wants us to do or how they are. We become just like them. And we don't recognize that we're actually being quite codependent on the wrong person. Do you know there's only one healthy codependency? Codependency on God. That is the only healthy codependency we can have, not on any other single person. But a lot of us have never thought, what is important to me? Or what has God made important to me? Or what's important to God? I want to have an identity based on that, not just on whoever's around me. And so one of the things that we can do is we can develop a values assessment. And these are just some categories that we might want to think about in terms of what should my boundaries be? So how does this look? So the first one on this list, if you can see all of them, the first one is health. Do you know health is not important to everybody? Not everybody values health. But here's even what's more important. You might be in an environment that values health. But does everybody value health the same way? No, I work with all kinds of people, and I notice some people, for them, health is working out 3 to 5 hours at the gym every single day. That is health to them. That's what they call healthy. Somebody else might have 25 different supplements that they're on, and that's healthy for them. And somebody else might say, well, I don't think the food's so important, but my mental health is really important. So I go to multiple therapy sessions, I go to groups and all that sort of thing, and that's healthy to me. And somebody else is on every single food kick, and they join every single conference on health, and that's healthy for them. If I've never gotten down to, hey, what's important to me? What do I value? What winds up happening depending on who I spend time with? I just take on whatever's important to them. I've never understood what is important to me, or ultimately what's important to God for me. And so this is why each one of these, we should all take a values assessment. How about financially? Some people believe, hey, as soon as the money comes in, I'm going to spend it. Other people save and save and save, and they don't spend it on anything. What happens depending on who you're around? Ironically, I don't know why husbands and wives always seem to find the opposite of themselves. One person likes to spend, one person likes to save, and then they have to go at it over that. But it's important to figure out what is important to you, and then to stick by those things if they're important to you. All of these are very important. Even family. What's important to my family? Just because I remember I'm first generation Adventist because my parents came into the church, right before they had me. I don't know if you call that first generation or second, whatever. First full generation Adventist. And one of the things my parents didn't realize is when they came into the church, there's many different ways to be an Adventist, right? I'm not saying many different ways we should be an Adventist, but many different ways that people are Adventists. And they kind of just followed the ways that the people were around them. So they ate the things that they ate, and they did the Sabbath activities that everybody else around them did, not realizing, oh, this is something we want to consult God on and figure out what's important to us. And so all of these are important things that we should be doing based on what the Holy Spirit is leading us to do, not just because of other people. But how about this one? Number 2, the settler. This is the best I can do. Sometimes we don't have healthy boundaries because we just kind of settle for how things are. And in Isaiah 55 verse 2, it says, why spend on money on what is not bread, and your labor on what it does not satisfy? Listen to me, and eat what is good, and you will delight in the riches of fare. A lot of people are settling. Do you know your brain is powerful? And a lot of people today in our culture want somebody else to make the decisions for them. They just want to go with the flow, and it keeps us from having healthy boundaries in our lives. Why do you think God put these miraculous computers into our heads? So we could use them, not to give somebody else control or power over the things that we do. I'm not saying that, we aren't submissive to the people that are put in front of us or ahead of us in a godly way, but it does mean that we have to think about these things. And just to settle and go, well, this is the best that I can do, it keeps us from having healthy boundaries in our lives. And if you notice, I showed you that triangle earlier of the thoughts, behaviors, and feelings. If I believe this is the best that I can do, I don't have any boundaries, I don't try to be better, I might be clingy when it comes to relationships, and I might even beat myself up, and then my feelings, I'll feel anxious, depressed, apathetic, and even angry. Why do we feel angry when we believe this is the best we can do? Because we're not looking for creative solutions to our problems. Do you know when you believe this is the best that you can do, you stop being creative? Because you already told yourself there's nothing that you can do. This is the best it will be. Isn't that sad? That limits our ability to be creative. Do you know that's the only difference between you and somebody who is more successful in life? And I don't just mean monetarily or power-wise. You probably already figured this is the best I can do when somebody else is like, no, I think I can keep improving. That's the only difference. It's not how smart you are, how bright you are, how many connections, resources, all of that. It's just the difference between somebody that keeps going versus somebody that gives up. How about, here's another belief you can replace it with. If God desires the best for me, I need to set my standards higher in my relationships. That's something we can replace instead of, this is the best I can do, especially in relationships. How about this one, the guilty party? This is one of my favorite ones of the ones I'm sharing with you. I'm responsible for everything. Do you know there's two different types of guilt? There's rational guilt. What is rational guilt? I've done something wrong, and I'm guilty for it. So what's the other type of guilt? Irrational guilt. What is irrational guilt? When somebody else does something wrong, and they don't like that feeling of guilt, and so what do? You're going to take it. And we call that, I just heard somebody say that, projection. Projection is when I don't feel comfortable with maybe my selfishness. And so I'm going to tell you that you're selfish. I want something that you have, and I'm being selfish and asking for that, but I don't want to acknowledge my selfishness, so I'm going to tell you you're selfish for not giving it to me. This is why sometimes I cringe a little when I hear parents say to their child or another child when another kid comes up and takes the toy, what do parents often say? Share. But what did we just teach that child to do? If somebody else rushes in and grabs it from you, what are you supposed to do? Just let them have it. Right? Is that what we should be teaching our kids to do? Survival of the fittest? Just give it to them then. How about, hey, why don't you wait your turn, and when they're done playing, you can play with it too. Something along those lines. That teaches the other kid especially not to just rush in and grab things because they're going to get it. But so often when it comes to irrational guilt, what we're doing is we're taking on somebody else's guilt. Maybe it's our child who came home from school. I know school got out for a lot of kids, but our child comes home from school and maybe it's the night before they have a project due. We find this out that night, and the kid's saying, hey, I need to go get some stuff for my project. And you're like, it's 7 o'clock at night. This is too late. My kid's never going to finish this project. How long have you known about this? I forgot. And so then what do? We feel guilty because our kid didn't do their project, and now we feel like, am I going to be a bad parent that I'm not helping them with it? So then what happens? You wind up rushing to the store, and then you do most, if not all, of their project to make sure they don't get a bad grade, because you don't want to look like a bad parent. Are you a bad parent? Yeah? Was that a Freudian slip? No, it doesn't make you a bad parent. Now, if you know that your kid is too young to pay attention to their homework assignments or something like that, yeah, maybe you should have tried a little bit more to make sure they're up and on their homework. But if they're of the age where they can keep track of things, but they've just wanted to do something else instead. By the way, I've seen a lot of parents do this, but I'm gonna give you some reality here. When do schools start caring about your grades? At what grade level do they start caring about your grades? High school, and usually not until about sophomore year if you want to get into college. So how many years do you have to teach your kid the responsibility and the consequences of not getting their homework in time without it doing too much damage to them? You have a lot of years to do that. If you keep doing their homework for them, you're going to have to do like what some of my clients have found themselves doing. And they're burnt out because they're driving to their kids' college, helping them out every so often, write their papers and finish their homework assignments, because what did their kid learn? If I don't do my project, guess who's going to help me? because they feel bad. By the way, here's another way we often feel guilt too. What if we have made some really bad mistakes as parents? And so we keep trying to play catch up by doing more and more things for our kids because we feel so bad about the past mistakes that we've made. Maybe we didn't pick the right spouse for them or for their parent to be their parent. Maybe we weren't there for them for a certain period of time. Do you know, in that point, draw a line and tell your child, I'm sorry I made mistakes. Give the best apology you've ever given in your life. And say, but from here on out, we're not going to keep creating more mistakes to try to make up for the other ones. We're going to start right here. And that way you don't have to carry that guilt forever with you. And your kids will understand. By the way, I work with a lot of kids. And I'll tell those kids straight to their faces with their parent there, your parent feels really guilty about messing things up for you, but you're going to straighten it out right now and you're going to do things right, and you're going to do what your parent asks you to do, and your parent's going to tell you what to do when they know what's best for you. And do you know what those kids do? They go, okay. They respect that. That's what they want. Every healthy child wants a parent who is firm and confident in their role. That doesn't mean you can't make mistakes. It means you confidently apologize for your mistakes and you recognize what you've done. But sometimes we just keep saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, and we never correct it. I want people to be responsible for when you actually do something wrong and not responsible when you don't do something wrong. So take responsibility for the rational guilt. Don't take responsibility for the irrational guilt. Too often what that does is it creates confusion if you're doing the opposite. So take responsibility for what's yours and let other people have responsibility for what's theirs. If you don't, you are keeping them from the Holy Spirit working on them if you try to take on their guilt. So don't take on their guilt just to make it peaceful and happy and quiet. It won't actually do that. The next one, the romancer. This isn't a typical romancer. When we use that word in the archaic, what do we mean? Like somebody just likes to make everything happy and joyful and that sort of thing. But in this case, we're talking about when I have certain feelings, I just ride on those feelings without thinking about what are healthy boundaries. So that's what I mean about the romancer. And in this case, a lot of us like to think of things in a certain way when they're not, and then we get really frustrated when they're not that way. And so if you can see this little graph here, the difference between expectation and reality is the level of frustration you're experiencing. So think about that again. The difference between expectation and reality is the level of frustration you're feeling. So if this is reality, but this is expectation, if you're not acknowledging what is reality and your expectation is up here, what's the level of frustration you're going to experience between here and here? But if reality comes down closer, or reality and expectation comes down to reality, what happens? You're going to have less frustration. What does this look like? Sometimes in our relationships, we want people to be a certain way, and we don't acknowledge the way that they are. Have you ever tried to keep expecting maybe your parent to be a certain way, and you get frustrated that they don't do the things that you've always wanted them to do? And then you realize, wait, they're never this way. That's the level of frustration you're going to have all the time. Oh, I wanted a mom just like so-and-so had, and I never got that. You're going to be frustrated because what are you comparing what you had to? What you had to this. But if you acknowledge this is what I have, what can I do to make the best of it? Then that will help you have a better reality or a better level of less frustration. And so we want to make these things more in reality. That doesn't mean to set your standards lower. It just means to acknowledge people for who they are. I recommend a book, Ministry of Healing. A lot of times we think that people should be a certain way, and we don't understand that they've gone through a lot of difficulties to even get to where they are. And we want people to be oh, how come they're not this way? And I think this is one of the reasons why the world is struggling so much now with division between people. Because I want people to be this way, and they're not this way. We have high expectations for everybody else, but we want everybody else to accept us. Does that make sense? And so we're frustrated with everybody, and instead of just saying, hey, this person might be this way because of this. And I need to be okay with the fact that this person may not be exactly where I want them to be right now. But I can pray for them, I can maybe work with them, maybe have better boundaries, not put myself in their path all the time, and that way I can be happier too. And then I can also ask too, because sometimes when it comes to romancers, we actually drop our boundaries because we make people out to be something that they're not, better than they are too. And I don't know if you heard about this recently. This just happened in Louisiana. Every few years something like this happens. Does anybody remember what just happened in the news in Louisiana? Had to do with jail or prison. People broke out of, there were quite a few of the people that broke out of prison. Quite a few. Does anybody know who helped them out? Do you remember? There's a certain demographic. People who worked in there, but do you know what consistently every single prison break has had involved in it? This one may have had several, but they've all had female security guards. Are you thinking hard about what I'm talking about? What do you think all those women said when they were helping those guys out? Oh, he loves me. He's different than all the other guys that are in here. Right? One of the things I always tell my clients when they're considering boundaries and doing something they shouldn't do is, if you had a highly respected person in your life and you were to tell them what you're about to do, what do you think they would say? Do you know we all have a highly respected person we can consult anytime we're about to do something based on just how we feel? How would God think about this if I were to do this? And this is one way that we cannot be a romancer and just go by our feelings and something and say, well, this is different. We always like to be the exception of the rule, don't we? But God has a different way, and this is why boundaries are so important in our workplace, wherever we go, in the church, that sort of thing. What would God think this is a good idea? That's a good way to think of what kind of boundary I need to have in this situation. Number 5, the rescuer. Have you all seen this or heard of this little parable of the elephant who was tied to a stake as a baby to keep it from going too far? And it pulls and pulls and pulls and pulls, and what does it realize?
Can't get away.
Can't get away. So what happens when it gets older? It remembers it and doesn't even try, even though it's big enough to get away. Here's the thing. So often in our lives, we become rescuers of people, and we enable people to be less than they're able to be because we want to do the work for them, or we feel good about doing the work for them and enabling them to not have to do the work. Here's a story that I came across. This boy, his name is Ben Underwood, and on the top left picture, that is about the time he lost his eyesight. And at the point that this video was done, I had to take screenshots of the video because I couldn't find any pictures of him. He was a teenager, and it was 2006, so I haven't found any recent pictures of him. But his mom decided, when the doctor told her that her son was not going to be able to see, she decided, I'm not going to tell my son he's blind. Now, do you think he found out he was blind at some point? Absolutely. But she decided she's not going to treat him as though he's blind. So do you know what happened at the time up until this point? This kid learned to do something that only animals, as far as I know how to do. Dolphins, bats, echolocation. This boy would click. And he could hear the echo off of walls, off of the curb, off buildings, off trees. This boy, I couldn't find a picture of this if I had gone through the video further. He does not need his mom to walk him like that. They're just close. But he could ride his bike with his friends, totally blind. He could play basketball with his friends. He could run just the whole time he was clicking. He could sense. Do you think his brain took over? Certain part of his brain took over for another part of the brain. By the way, your brain can do this in many different ways. But it was all because his mom didn't try to rescue her son. He was able to do this. She did not steal his independence. And so often we think we're helping people, but we're actually stealing their independence. Have any of you ever watched the Special Olympics? I'm pretty sure those swimmers without arms and legs are better, faster swimmers than I am. And I consider myself to be a swimmer. I was watching it on YouTube once and I was like, they're so fast. There was one guy that had no arms and no legs. How do you swim? He was doing that across the pool and he was going so fast. And I thought, man, or rock climbers that are missing fingers and legs and arms. And they do it anyway. Do you think we're capable of a lot more? Maybe the people in our lives who are suggesting to us that they're victims or hurting or they can't do certain things, maybe we're compensating for them, not realizing that we could say this instead. I have the utmost faith you will figure this out. That is one of the greatest things I've ever heard my dad tell me. I don't think he knows this yet. But one of the things that he has told me in the past that gives me a lot of sense of ability is that, you know what, I don't ever worry about you. I know you'll figure out how to do it. And it makes me feel really good because then it makes me believe that I can do those things. But we can do this for other people. But one of the things that often goes with this is what I call a savior complex. I'm nothing if not needed. Why do we often make victims out of the people in our lives who are highly capable of doing things? Because our identity comes from rescuing. And so we burn ourselves out doing more and more and more and more and more, not realizing we might be helping this person, but maybe our family is left behind because we're always at work. And we're not having healthy boundaries in our relationships. We're not allowing other people to rise up and do certain things because I have to be the savior. Moms do this a lot too. Who am I if I'm not a mom and I'm not taking care of my kids? You know, or a dad, who am I if I'm not at work and, conquering the working world? We get our identity from doing this, and we can't go on vacations because everybody's calling us and emailing us, trying to figure out what to do without us because we've made ourselves indispensable. By the way, we're all replaceable when it comes to our jobs. Anybody else could do our job. But not everybody else can be you to your kids. Not everybody else can be you in terms of discipling people. Maybe that's a better way to get our identities than to just run and do everything for people. And I love how that mom that I mentioned, Ben's mom, didn't rush to rescue him because she wanted him to learn to be independent. So those two go together. What's better than being a rescuer is leading others to the rescuer and giving them the power to be independent. Number 7, patience isn't a virtue. Have you heard this phrase? Time will make it better. Have you heard that? We hear that a lot. Is time magical? Time can't do anything. Have you ever seen somebody get worse over time? Yeah, so what does that mean? Does that mean time gets everybody better or makes everything better? No. Why do we say this then? You know why I think we say this? Because we don't want to confront the hard things. If time fixes everything, then I don't have to do anything to try to fix it. And so we avoid doing those hard conversations. We avoid doing the hard work, sometimes even therapy, because, it's just easier to believe time will fix it. But that's not what happens. I can't put off doing the hard work that will ultimately lead to knowing who I am and others within this relationship. Who I am and who others are within this relationship. Number 8, the supplier. We're almost done. They're always right and I'm always wrong. Sometimes we have relationships with people who can be selfish. Some people like to use the word narcissistic. I think that word's thrown out way too much, but not all people who are selfish are necessarily narcissistic. There are some requirements for that term. But we often allow others to break down boundaries or not have our own boundaries because it's easier just to be the wrong person and for that person to be right. And so we actually supply them with more and more to build their egos and keep them in that place. Even with unhealthy family relationships. We don't have to do this though. What is it about this person that wants to be with someone they are always needing to fix? Sometimes we're in relationships and that person says, you need to do this and you need to do that. By the way, people who are highly anxious also have this quality. They want to fix everything outside of them because it's really hard to fix what's going on inside. I see the time. Thank you for the reminder, though. I have 3 minutes, I've told. So we don't want to fix those. We don't want to fix those people. We want to let the Holy Spirit fix them. We don't have to keep trying to rescue them and supply all of their needs in order for them to be fixed. Number 9, the enabler. I can't let go or something bad will happen. Sometimes we have people in our lives that are constantly needing help. Constantly needing help. They need help with more money, place to live, all of these things, and we work harder and harder and harder to try to take care of them. But they seem to be in the same place every time we see them. But one of the situations where this often happens is when we have people who even tell us things like, I'm going to hurt myself, or I'm going to kill myself if you don't spend If you don't know what police officers do, look it up. They aren't just about collecting people to take them to jail or prison. The last one, dreamers. Sometimes dreamers have poor boundaries too because they believe I have to pretend it's something else. They don't want to ever face the situation the way that it is. They want to think it's something else. So instead, we need to say, I need to face the facts and work on the things that need to be worked on, and I can't keep pretending things aren't what they are. This is what we need to say instead. And I am rushing. I do know the time is up. So here's some things to remember when it comes to boundaries. 1, there are 3 steps. First, you need to know what you value. You'll never have boundaries if you don't know what you value. That's the first thing. The second thing is you have to implement the boundaries. You don't always have to say what they are, though. Do you know if I don't want people kicking me, in the shins. Do you know I don't have to go around telling everybody don't kick me in the shins? That would be ridiculous. Can you imagine if I went everywhere and said don't kick me in the shins? But I know what my boundary is, and so if somebody does, I'll have a talk with them and say, hey, you kick me in the shins, that's not okay. But if somebody breaks that boundary, there has to be consequences. I hear people so often say, I keep telling people what I don't want them to do and they keep doing it. Do you know I keep speeding? I have to admit it, I keep speeding, but do you know why I do it? Because every time I leave my house, there's not a police officer waiting to escort me to work, and the grocery store and everywhere else I go. Do you know why? I'm an opportunist. I'm not a horrible person. Well, I guess that's up to other people to judge that, but, or God especially, but I'm not a horrible person just because I speed. There's no consequences every time I get on the road. If there are no consequences to your boundaries, people aren't going to believe that your boundaries are important. Number 2, practice. Start practicing things like, let me think about that. I don't feel comfortable doing that. Number 3, and this is reinforced already, boundaries are necessary. And good boundaries represent truth and real kindness. You are actually being kind when you set boundaries with people. They know what to expect from you. Number 5, boundaries don't require the other person to understand. This is another thing I hear a lot of people say. But what if they don't understand the boundary and they keep trying to explain it over and over and over again? You don't have to understand something to keep the boundary, do you? If somebody tells you, you know if there's consequences what to do. You don't have to understand it. God doesn't always explain his boundaries sometimes to us in the way that we want to understand it. But over time we get to learn why it's important. And then the last one, God has boundaries and Jesus practiced boundaries when he was on this earth. I think that's really key to recognize. Even kindness should have its limits, Ellen White says. I'm just going to leave with this last verse. Matthew 5:17 says, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill." In other words, Jesus is saying, I'm building up excitement for the next one. In case you had any questions, I'm here to uphold as the final say, the law and the prophets, even in my own life. That's what Jesus was saying. So boundaries are important. Jesus emphasized that, and we need to have boundaries too. I hope I'll see you tomorrow. We're going to talk about purification. You have no idea what that's going to be about, but I guarantee it's something you've probably never heard before. So I will say good afternoon to you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Amanda.